Sabbateans. The Sabbateans, or Sabbatians, are a variety of Jewish followers, disciples, and believers in Sabbateanism, 1626 to 1676, an Ottoman Jewish rabbi and Kabbalist who was proclaimed to be the Jewish Messiah in 1666 by Nathan of Gaza. Vast numbers of Jews in the Jewish diaspora accepted his claims, even after he outwardly became an apostate due to his forced conversion to Islam the same year. Sabbateanism's followers, both during his proclaimed messiahship and after his forced conversion to Islam, are known as Sabbatians. In the late 17th century, northern Italy experienced a surge of Sabbatian activity, driven by the missionary efforts of Abraham Miguel Cardoso. Around 1700, a radical faction within the dona movement, led by Baruch Russo, emerged, which sought to abolish many biblical prohibitions. During the same period, Sabbatian groups from Poland migrated to the land of Israel. The Sabbatian movement continued to disseminate throughout Central Europe and northern Italy during the 18th century. Propelled by prophets and believers, concurrently, anti-Sabbatian literature emerged, leading to a notable dispute between Rabbi Jacob Emden, 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗱𝗏𝗏, and Jonathan A. Beskutz. Additionally, a successor movement known as Frankism, led by Jacob Frank, began in Eastern Europe during this century. Part of the Sabbatians lived on until well into 21st century Turkey as descendants of the dona. Sabbateanism. Sabbateanism was a Sephardic ordained rabbi from Smyrna, now Izmir, Turkey, a Kabbalist of Romaniot origin, 𝗧𝗿, who was active throughout the Ottoman Empire, claimed to be the long-awaited Jewish Messiah. He was the founder of the Sabbatian movement, whose followers subsequently were to be known as dona converts or crypto-Jews. Conversion to Islam. In February 1666, upon arriving in Constantinople, Sabbatai was imprisoned on the order of the Grand Vizier, 𝗖𝗆𝗱𝗱𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗆, in September of that same year, after being moved from different prisons around the capital to Adrianople, the imperial court seat. For judgment on accusations of fomenting sedition, Sabbatai was given by the Grand Vizier, in the name of the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Mehmed IV, the choice of either facing death by some type of ordeal, or of converting to Islam. Sabbatai seems to have chosen the latter, by donning from then on a turban. He was then also rewarded by the heads of the Ottoman state with a generous pension for his compliance with their political and religious plans. Sabbatai's conversion to Islam was extremely disheartening for the world's Jewish communities. In addition to the misery and disappointment from within, Muslims and Christians jeered at and scorned the credulous and duped Jews. In spite of Sabbatai's apostasy, many of his adherents still tenaciously clung to him, claiming that his conversion was a part of the messianic scheme. This belief was further upheld and strengthened by the likes of Nathan of Gaza and Samuel Primo, who were interested in maintaining the movement. Many within 𝗧𝗿's inner circle followed him into Islam, including his wife Sarah, and most of his closest relatives and friends. Nathan of Gaza, the scholar closest to 𝗧𝗍, who had caused 𝗧𝗍 to reveal his messiahship and in turn became his prophet, never followed his master into Islam, but remained a Jew, albeit excommunicated by his Jewish brethren. After Sabbatai 𝗧𝗍's apostasy, many Jews, although horrified, clung to the belief that 𝗧𝗍 could still be regarded as a true Jewish Messiah. They constituted the largest number of Sabbatians during the 17th and 18th centuries. By the 19th century, Jewish Sabbatians had been reduced to small groups of hidden followers who feared being discovered for their beliefs, that were deemed to be entirely heretical and antithetical to rabbinic Judaism. These very Jews fell under the category of sectarian Sabbatians, which originated when many Sabbatians refused to accept that 𝗧𝗍's feigned apostasy have been indicative of the fact that their faith was genuinely an illusion. Another large group of Sabbatians, after 𝗧𝗍's apostasy, began to view Islam in an extremely negative light. polemics against Islam erupted directly after 𝗧𝗏𝗱𝗏's forced conversion. Some of these attacks were considered part of a largely anti-Sabbatian agenda. Accusations coming from anti-Sabbatian Jews revolved around the idea that Sabbateanism's feigned conversion to Islam was rightfully an indicator of a false claim of messianship inside the Ottoman Empire. Those followers of 𝗧𝗏𝗱𝗏 who had converted to Islam, but who secretly continued Jewish observances, and Brit Mila became known as the dona, Turkish dindm convert. There were some internal subdivisions within the sect, according to the geographical locations of the group, and according to who the leaders of these groups were after the death of Sabbateanism. Sabbatian-related controversies in Jewish history. The 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 controversy was a serious rabbinical disputation with wider political ramifications in Europe that followed the accusations by Rabbi Jacob Emden, 1697 to 1776, a fierce opponent of the Sabbatians, against Rabbi Jonathan 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗍, 1692–1764, whom he accused of being a secret Sabbatian. The 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 controversy arose concerning the amulets which Emden suspected 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏 of issuing. It was alleged that these amulets recognized the messianic claims of Sabbateanism. Emden then accused 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏 of heresy. Emden was known for his attacks directed against the adherents, or those he supposed to be adherents, of Sabbateanism. In Emden's eyes, 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏 was a convicted Sabbatian. The controversy lasted several years, continuing even after 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏's death. Emden's assertion of heresy was chiefly based on the interpretation of some amulets prepared by 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏, in which Emden professed to see Sabbatian allusions. Hostilities began before 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏 left Prague, when 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏 was named chief rabbi of the three communities of Altona, Hamburg, and Wandsbek in 1751. The controversy reached the stage of intense and bitter antagonism. Emden maintained that he was at first prevented by threats from publishing anything against 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏. He solemnly declared in his synagogue the writer of the amulets to be a Sabbatian heretic and deserving of 𝗖𝗰𝗰𝗍𝗮, excommunication. The majority of the rabbis in Poland, Moravia, and Bohemia, as well as the leaders of the three communities, supported 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏. The accusation was utterly incredible. In July 1725, the Ashkenazic Beth Din of Amsterdam had issued a ban of excommunication on the entire Sabbatian sect, Kot HaMamanim. Writings of Sabbatian nature, found by the Beit Din at that time, were attributed to 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏. In early September, similar proclamations were issued by the Beit Din of Frankfurt and the triple community of Altona, Hamburg, and Wandsbek. The three bans were printed and circulated in other Jewish communities throughout Europe. Rabbi Ezekiel Katzenellenbogen, the chief rabbi of the triple community, and Rabbi Moses Haggis were unwilling to attack 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏𝗏 publicly, mentioning that greater than him have fallen and crumbled, and that there is nothing we can do to him. However, Rabbi Katzenellenbogen stated that one of the texts found by the Amsterdam Beit Din 𝗧𝗏𝗍𝗏𝗏𝗏, and I came this day into the fountain, was authored by Jonathan 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏𝗏, and declared that the all copies of the work that were in circulation should be immediately burned. Emden later suggested that the rabbis decided against attacking 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏𝗏 out of a reluctance to offend his powerful family and a fear of rich supporters of his living in their communities. As a result of 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏 and other rabbis in Prague formulating a new and different ban against Sabbatianism, in September of that year, his reputation was restored and 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏 was regarded as having been totally vindicated. The issue was to arise again, albeit tangentially, in the 1751 dispute between Emden and 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏. The controversy was a momentous incident in Jewish history of the period, involving both Yechezkel Landau and the Vilna Gaon, and may be credited with having crushed the lingering belief in Sabbatai current, even in some Orthodox circles. In 1760, the quarrel broke out once more, when some Sabbatian elements were discovered among the students of 𝗍𝗍𝗱𝗏𝗏𝗏 yeshiva. At the same time his younger son, Wolf, presented himself as a Sabbatian prophet, with the result that the yeshiva was closed. Sabbatians and early Hasidism. Some scholars see seeds of the Hasidic movement within the Sabbatian movement. When Hasidism began to spread its influence, a serious schism evolved between the Hasidic and non-Hasidic Jews. Those who rejected the Hasidic movement dubbed themselves as misnagdim, opponents. Critics of Hasidic Judaism expressed concern that Hasidism might become a messianic sect, as had occurred among the followers of both 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗍𝗍 and Jacob Frank. However, the 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗱𝗶𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗍, the founder of Hasidism, came at a time when the Jewish masses of Eastern Europe were reeling in bewilderment and disappointment engendered by the two Jewish false messiahs, 𝗧𝗵𝗆𝗍𝗍 (1626–1676) and Jacob Frank (1726–1791), in particular. Sabbatians and modern secularism. Some scholars have claimed that the Sabbatian movement in general fostered and connected well with the principles of modern secularism. Rabbis who opposed the Sabbatians, 𝗧𝗵𝗆𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗍𝗶 (1572–1662), was especially known for having been the teacher of 𝗧𝗵, and for having afterward excommunicated him. Aaron Lapapa, 1590–1674, was the rabbi at Smyrna in 1665, when 𝗧𝗵's movement was at its height there. He was one of the few rabbis to oppose and excommunicate 𝗧𝗵. 𝗧𝗵 and his adherents retorted by deposing him and forcing him to leave the city, and his office was given to his colleague, Chaim ben Venesti, at that time one of Sabbatai's followers. After Sabbatai's conversion to Islam, Lapapa seems to have been reinstated. Jacob ben Aaron Sasportas, 1610–1698, was one of the fiercest opponents of the Sabbatian movement. He wrote many letters to various communities in Europe, Asia, and Africa, exhorting them to unmask the impostors and to warn the people against them. He documented his struggle in his book 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗆𝗆𝗍, the title being based on Isaiah 28:4. He wrote a number of works, such as 𝗍𝗿𝗍𝗆𝗍𝗆 1652, an index of biblical passages found in the Haggadah of the Jerusalem Talmud, similar to Aaron Pezro's Toledo or Horon, which relates to the Babylonian Talmud only, and 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆 1737, a volume of halachic responsa, which includes polemical correspondence against 𝗧𝗵 and his followers. Jacob Haggis, 1620–1674, was one of 𝗧𝗵's chief opponents, who put him under the ban. About 1673 Haggis went to Constantinople to publish his Lemhopanim, but he died there before this was accomplished. This book, as well as many others of his, was lost. Naphtali Cohen, 1649–1718, was a Kabbalist who was tricked into giving an approbation to a book by the Sabbatian 𝗍𝗆. Provided with this, and with other recommendations secured in the same way, 𝗍𝗆 traveled throughout Moravia and Silesia, propagating everywhere his Sabbatian teachings. Cohen soon discovered his mistake, and endeavored, without success, to recover his approbation, although he did not as yet realize the full import of the book. It was in 1713, while Cohen was staying at Breslau, where he acted as a rabbi until 1716, that 𝗲𝗵𝗱𝗆𝗆𝗍𝗆 of Amsterdam informed him of its tenets. Cohen thereupon acted rigorously. He launched a ban against the author and his book, and became one of the most zealous supporters of 𝗲𝗵𝗱𝗆 in his campaign against 𝗍𝗆. David Neto, 1654–1728, was the 𝗲𝗵 of the Spanish and Portuguese Jewish community in London. He waged war untiringly on the Sabbatians, which he regarded as dangerous to the best interests of Judaism, and in this connection wrote his Eshdāt, London, 1715, against 𝗍𝗆, who supported 𝗧𝗵. 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗍𝗆, 1656–1718, known as the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, for some time Rabbi of Amsterdam, was a resolute opponent of the followers of Sabbatai. In Salonika, he also witnessed the impact of the Sabbatai movement on the community, and this experience became a determining factor in his whole career. His son Jacob Emden served as rabbi in Emden, and followed in his father's footsteps in combating the Sabbatean movement. Moses Haggis, 1671 to around 1750, was born in Jerusalem and waged a campaign against Sabbatean emissaries during 1725 to 1726. Jacob Emden, 1697 to 1776, was Talmudic scholar and leading opponent of the Sabbatians. He is best known as the opponent of Rabbi Jonathan 𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗁, whom he accused of being a Sabbatian during the Emden 𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱 controversy.